So on the 28th of March 2024, I went to see a movie. That movie happened to be Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. And it was... Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is the next installment in Legendary's Monsterverse. Right out the gate, being no surprise to anybody, this movie is a silly, goofy, sci-fi monster movie where a big gorilla gains the Infinity Gauntlet and has to team up with Godzilla, now Barbie Lizard, in order to stop the evil doppelganger versions of themselves. So this is going to be the spoiler-free review section of the video. It will contain no spoilers, and it will just be me ranting over the general plot points of the movie and just skim over it and give my basic thoughts on them. Despite the brief, sarcastic summary, I really enjoyed this movie. Currently, I feel like there's something off about this movie as a whole that downgrades it in comparison to Godzilla vs. Kong, the movie that came out previously and did pretty well, honestly, critically and fan-wise. But it's probably all the wacky sci-fi shit they introduced in this movie. Overall, I'm happy to say that this movie is a worthy sequel to Godzilla vs. Kong and expands upon that movie in ways you've never expected. Lots of people compared this movie to the campy, goofy Showa-era Godzilla films from the 60s and 70s, and I don't blame them. This movie feels like a modern Showa film, and I love how Wingard knew that and just decided to ride home with it. Kong easily steals the show in this movie. Like in Godzilla vs. Kong, the story mainly revolves around him, as for the first half of this movie, Kong and Zuko learn to respect and trust one another as they make their way to Scar King's place, which were probably the best scenes in this movie. There's the scene where Kong arrives at the pit with all the great apes, and the fact that everything is shown in between the apes with no dialogue and is purely shown through Kong, the apes, Zuko's, and Scar King's facial expressions is amazingly well done. It gives me heavy Planet of the Apes vibes, which I expected going into this movie. Scar King is also really well done. He gives me a lot of Koba vibes from Planet of the Apes, and I think he was one of their inspirations for him. He's a really good villain at the moment. His personality really makes him show that he takes pride in his evil actions. Besides me glazing over Kong's story, Godzilla doesn't really have much to do in this movie. He shows up from time to time and does what the script tells him to do. He evolves and teams up with King Kong. Each of those scenes take place like 20 minutes of each other, and by the way, you're not going to see Goji present on screen much besides the final fights. The human cast is still not notable, but in my opinion, somewhat enjoyable, as this movie really benefits from a small group of humans. Our main squad, Rebecca Hall as Eileen Andrews, Brian Tyree Henry as Bernie, Kaylee Hoddle as Gia, and Dan Stevens as Trapper. Dan steals the show every time he's on screen, and the little Australian goober provides this energetic vibe and has a blast in each scene he's in. Both him and Bernie just go off of each other so well and provide the perfect comedic bromance that I never thought I needed from this movie. Besides the fun characters, Eileen and Gia have some emotional scenes and plotline together, but compared to the Kong storyline, I feel like most of the emotion and passion went into that one rather than the Eileen and Gia stuff. Some dialogue exchanges and how that is written is really corny in some cases. Other than that, there's just a bunch of random dumb human plot lines that I'll dive into in the spoiler section, but I kid you not, there's some wild outlandish shit in those sequences that I even thought in a giant movie where King Kong has a robo glove and there's an entire ecosystem and world with all these wacky creatures and gravitational distortion in the center of the planet, that they jump the shark a little bit. Humans in this movie are nothing to write home about, but at least they kinda tried to put something there. Whether that effort is good or bad, I'll let you decide on that. But we all know the human meat sacks are filler in this movie, and most of you, including you, yes you, are here for the monster action. The action in this movie is fast-paced and lacks the scale you would see in previous Monsterverse movies, but I kinda liked how the action was presented in specific environments the battles took place in, for example. During the Hollow Earth fight scenes, the camera movement is sporadic. It flips a lot as the camera spins around, simulating the lack of gravity and control. But overall, the scenes where Kong is kicking ass are amazing, unlike Godzilla's where he just shows up, oh no, a cool Titan's there, and he one-taps them. The final battle is enjoyable as always, and you're going to have an amazing time watching these fights unfold. Whether I feel like the last 3 minutes of the final battle are a bit underwhelming to say the least, but I had a good time watching it as a whole, even though it may blend a lot together for some people. So to end my spoiler-free review, I give this movie a solid 7.5 out of 10. The monsters are amazing, and the way the movie handled Kong and his story just makes me want to rewatch those scenes again and again. The human plotline goes bullshit crazy just to make up for the fact that they're human scenes and nobody likes them. But the cast works really well together, so if you like the previous installments of the Monsterverse, I bet you're gonna like this one. But there's just something very off about this movie, and I'd have no clue what it's about. This is the part of the video where I talk much longer and go into full detail about specific segments of the movie. I talk a lot about major spoilers in this segment, so if you want to skip to my closing thoughts about the movie, jump to this timestamp here. If you don't want to stay and don't want to be spoiled, leave now if you haven't seen the movie yet. You've been warned. The best part of this movie is where Kong beats up 3 other apes with Zuko. I like that a lot. There are some parts in the action of this movie, as mentioned previously, that are really fast. The third act as a whole felt really quick. And as the Egypt rematch, the Hollow Earth and Rio de Janeiro final battle takes place less than 3 minutes of each other. The team up in general doesn't start until like the final 20 minutes of this movie, which is kind of crazy considering that was the whole gimmick of this movie. I wish they kept the fights going a tiny bit longer, but overall I'm satisfied with what was presented. Some moments were really shocking to see considering some of these titans weigh about 90,000 tons, and seeing creatures that heavy perform wrestling moves on each other is just crazy to me. Never would I have ever seen Godzilla perform a fucking suplex on King Kong before. During the movie, Godzilla doesn't come off as slow and sluggish. Godzilla straight up leaps in this movie multiple times. Godzilla sprints and he maneuvers like we've never seen him before. The Big G is very agile when it comes to his action scenes in this movie, and compared to what has come before. Godzilla's evolution was kind of pointless, to be honest. They've hyped it up in the promotional material as this big thing, only for Godzilla to swim to Tiamat's crib, kill her, and then rob her home to get that sweet solar pink energy glitter shit that was in the ice caps. Just because he felt like it, I guess? As mentioned previously, I liked how they really introduced Kong's and Gia's stories, and how both of them embark on similar thematic experiences. Like during the whole beginning sequence of this movie, after Kong kills like the war dogs and stuff, you clearly see he is a lonely dude. From his facial expressions and like his movement, all that, and the way the scenes are shot, Kong is very sad and alone in the Hollow Earth, and also goes to show his desperation when Kong hears his roar and goes out to find where it came from, only to have it be from a giant frog mimicking his roar. Gia also has this issue because she apparently can't fit in at her school or whatever, and is also drawing seismic activity in the Iwi pyramids on her desk and shit. And also for some reason Eileen hasn't thought of giving my girl her hearing aid yet, so the sequences of the movie really helped set up the theme that they were going for in this movie, which was finding your home and people you love, or something like that. Which was kind of the same plot as the last movie, but since the plotline wasn't fully resolved until this movie, I can see why they decided to finish it and complete it. Which was what I got out of this movie. Which also makes it why I love the ending of this movie so much. The infamous Scar King was alright, I guess. Personally, I love everything he did on screen, from the way he acted and the way he was portrayed in his scenes, to his overall look and design. Scar King comes off as this malicious tyrant that has little to no respect for his people, and takes pride in his power and watching others suffer, which was probably the whole goal behind him. Wingard said that he embodies every negative trait of humanity, and you can very well see that in his actions. Many of these traits, such as war, greed, and power, and many more, are seen as Scar King bluntly demonstrates them in front of us. And you can see these actions correspond to the ape society he rules over. His negative influence spills into the actions of his subjects. Before he's even introduced, before we're even introduced to him physically, Zuko and a few other apes jump Kong as soon as he discovers their lair of the Hollow Earth. Even though he is the same member of their species, they attack him and try to kill him multiple times in this scene, resulting in Kong having to kill multiple of his own kind as self-defense. There's this one scene where this one ape is about to fall off a cliff and Kong saves him, showing that he's capable and willing to save others even though they harmed him. After Kong saves him, the ape grabs his knife and tries to kill Kong even though he just saved him like 3 seconds earlier, showing that the apes that follow Scar King's influence, which teaches that trust between each member of Scar King's empire is thrown out the window and deceit lies rampant. An every man for himself type society. And this action results in Kong kicking the ape off the cliff after just saving him. This goes to show Scar King's actions and ideas influence his negative actions and culture of his subjects. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. As much as I can go on and on about every detail about the main villain, Scar King doesn't escape from criticism. First off, there isn't that much build up to him in this movie. We don't fully get to see him until way up until the 1 hour mark. Although the scenes where he does make his appearance kind of make up for that, as we're introduced to him and get his whole gist and vibe during the fight with Kong. Scar King's ultimate comeuppance kind of comes quick after Godzilla breaks his whip. Scar King is basically left defenseless, ultimately proving that he is a coward and a fraud, without his weaponry and power backing him up. Which makes it even more better when Kong gets to smash his frozen body into the ground, putting it stop to him for good. There isn't much time with him due to how the movie decided to have him introduced fully during the second act for some reason, but Scar King is overall a good villain.
Mini Kong
was surprisingly more complex as a character than I thought he was going to be. Zuko starts just as bad as the other apes Kong was ambushed by. After Kong dispatches the other apes, Zuko takes Kong back to his place. And that's when, during the road trip there, Zuko gets this amazing idea to lure Kong into a lake where he will get drowned by the local sea serpent. After Kong gets occupied and returns with dinner for the night, it's when Zuko realizes that Kong isn't there to hurt him. He realizes that Kong has been nice and respectful to him this entire time, even after Zuko has tried to blatantly kill him multiple times. These things and traits Zuko has never experienced or seen before. It's then during the scene where Kong throws him a part of the serpent to eat, Zuko starts to accept Kong's more positive ways opposed to the negative ones that Scar King has influenced upon the other great apes. Zuko doesn't fully turn good until the scene where Scar King kicks his cousin, parent, uncle? Anyways, this very specific monkey into a lava pool and Zuko watches him boil alive. Then after Kong gets his ass whooped by Shimo and Scar King, that he helps Kong. He helps him escape, he helps set off his traps to kill other apes that are after him, and helps Kong get help by assisting him all the way to the Eerie Temple. Didn't expect much from him, but I'm pleasantly surprised on how this movie did Zuko. Shimo was hyped way too much. The trailers and fans hyped up Shimo as this colossal threat that caused the Ice Age and froze Ghidorah and Antarctica in the third movie. Well, they were partially right. In the movie, she seems somewhat threatening in her very first scene where she freezes Kong's arm, but knowing that she's under the influence of Scar King and was not willing to do any of her actions and instead was just being abused by Scar King kinda de-escalates her presence as a central threat. But goddamn, she kicked Kong's ass in Rio, tossing him around by his arm like he was her squeaky toy. Scar King straight up has a full-on frozen pit bull on his hands. But after that, Zuko breaks the crystal that is controlling Shimo with pain or whatever, and she is released from Scar King's influence. Once Godzilla screams in her face, she realizes she is on the side of good and freezes Scar King solid. She's just a big dumb puppy. Now for the Iwi stuff. This stuff was really dumb in my opinion. How did they learn or realize they could communicate telepathically? Did they carve their pyramids and spears with the hollow earth crystals there? How on earth did they realize they could craft a gravitational manipulator? All this stuff just seems a wee bit too outlandish for me. They could have explained that stuff a little bit more. I mean, they did in the movie, but like, I want to know how like that stuff came to be. I expect Wingard to have aliens that have access to the Death Star in the next movie if they allow him to direct his final movie in this Godzilla Kong trilogy. Also, there's this whole thing about this prophecy with Gia and such. It seems really convenient that these Iwi people knew when this specific end of the world scenario happens that a very specific Iwi from a very specific Skull Island is needed to summon a very specific moth. So is Gia the chosen one now? Is she Professor X herself out of shit now? Because it damn well seems she teleported with Mothra to Egypt to stop Goji from straight up executing Kong. Just don't think about this too much. I guess it's just better if you don't question everything in this movie 24/7. Mothra is the grand surprise character of this movie, and well, she's here now. Now, I did enjoy her showing up, but she really didn't do much in this movie. She gets summoned by Gia. Mothra and Gia go to Egypt to calm Godzilla down and convince him to team up with Kong. She shows up at the start of the final battle, she webs up a bunch of Kongs, and doesn't even show up in Rio. Besides that, they introduce a whole bunch of new lore and stuff about Mothra being the guardian of the Iwi situation. When was this established? Is Mothra just the guardian of every ancient civilization that has ever existed? Was she just that one friend who just knows everybody and just did favors for people? Did the Iwi people build the temple in King of the Monsters for Mothra? It just leaves so many questions. She can also teleport now, which I'm also fine with. It fits her character and this mystical aura she has, I guess. I wish they kind of did more with her, considering she was actually built up throughout the Hollow Earth portions of this movie, with the ruins and stuff. So they should have definitely kept her King of the Monsters theme for this movie. Oh my god, what were they thinking? Scylla and Tiamat make what's basically cameos in this movie, and are absolutely wasted the second they show up on screen. Physically and plot-wise, both of them just serve as the generic killable enemy roadblock stereotype character for Godzilla, who is conveniently there in the scenes because he has to do what the script tells him to do. Both of their fights last about 50 seconds before Goji one-taps them with everybody's favorite notable Godzilla ability, the Atomic Breath. With Scylla popping like a water balloon and Tiamat chopped up into becoming a grilled eel rice bowl. And that's a shame because the movie went out of their way to give both of them new designs. Hell, Tiamat gets a whole Goji Center analysis segment in the middle of this movie. Lore-wise, it kind of makes sense Godzilla would straight up execute them on the spot, due to Scylla causing non-stop problems ever since the end of the King of the Monsters movie, and Tiamat almost killed Godzilla in the Godzilla Dominion comic, so who knows. I'm just upset on how short their fights were in this movie. So after all of that, that is my review on Godzilla Kong the New Empire. Let me know in the comments whether your experience with this movie was more positive than mine or more negative. What's your predictions for the next Monsterverse movie if this movie does well at the box office? And let me know if you want me to review more movies like this in the future. This movie is enjoyable, but somewhat forgettable. Like, right now I'm still processing everything that happened in the movie as of writing the script, but I feel like it's a good watch. It's necessarily flawed, but I feel like the positives outweigh the negatives of this movie. I really enjoyed my time with it, and I hope you all too if you get a chance to watch this movie in theaters. Now, goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!